Welcome to Document Right. In today's video, we're discussing how to update old documentation. Documentation is an essential part of any organization's operations. It records processes, procedures, and policies that help ensure consistency and efficiency. It is a roadmap for using the organization's product or service. However, documentation can become outdated over time, leading to inefficiency. Documentation should be updated regularly to remain accurate, relevant, and useful. Updating old documentation is a critical task that can help your organization operate more effectively. Why documentation needs to be updated. Number one, changes in policies and procedures. As an organization grows and evolves, its policies and procedures may change. It is important to update the documentation to reflect these changes and ensure everyone is on the same page. An organization can lose clients if its documentation does not produce the expected results because some steps have changed. Number two, compliance. Many industries have regulations and standards that organizations must comply with. For example, in the European Union, organizations must comply with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which requires extensive documentation related to data processing activities. Compliance with these regulations often requires ongoing updates to documentation to reflect changes in technology or updates to regulations. Updating documentation can help ensure that your organization is meeting those legal requirements. Outdated documentation may not meet these requirements, leading to compliance issues and potential legal problems. Number three, efficiency. Outdated documentation can lead to confusion and errors, which can slow down operations and reduce efficiency. Employees and customers may need more time figuring out outdated processes or procedures, which can impact productivity. By updating documentation, you can ensure that everyone has access to the most up-to-date information and processes. Number four, training. Documentation is often used as a training tool for new employees. It is also used to guide clients when using the company's products or services. By updating documentation, you can ensure that new employees and clients have access to the most current processes and procedures. Number five, communication. Documentation is often used to communicate important information to employees, customers, and other stakeholders. Outdated documentation can lead to poor communication, impacting relationships and trust. By updating documentation, you can ensure that everyone has access to the most accurate and relevant information. Now that we know why we need to update our documentation, let's look at the steps to actually do it. So first, you have to review the existing, now outdated documentation. Number two, identify the areas that need updating. Number three, involve the relevant subject matter experts, SMEs. Number four, make the necessary changes to the documentation systematically. Number five, test the documentation. And finally, number six, distribute the documentation and communicate the changes to your stakeholders. So let's look at each one by one. So first, we review the outdated documentation. This is the first step, and you should take time to go through each document and make a note of any outdated information or processes. This may include policies that are no longer relevant, tutorial steps that have changed, or contact information that is no longer accurate. You should also make sure to look at things like screenshots and videos as well, as they tend to quickly go out of date. Number 2, identify areas that need updating. Once you've reviewed your documentation, it's time to identify the areas that need updating. This may involve rewriting entire sections or just making minor edits. It's important to be thorough in this step to ensure your documentation is accurate and up to date. Number 3, make sure you involve subject matter experts. Involve SMEs in the process of updating documentation to ensure that you have a clear understanding of the subject matter. Subject matter experts have valuable insights or suggestions for improving documentation. This can also ensure that everyone is on the same page and understand the changes that need to be made. Number 4, make the necessary changes to the documentation. With a clear understanding of what needs to be updated, it's time to start making changes. This may involve rewriting entire sections, adding new information, new screenshots, videos, or making minor edits to the text. It's important to be clear and concise in your writing to ensure your documentation is easy to understand. There are various tools that you can use in this endeavor, like for example Grammarly or the Hemingway app. Number 5, test the documentation. Once you have made the necessary changes and you are done, it's important to test the documentation to ensure that it is accurate and effective. This may involve running tests or simulations to ensure the documentation is clear and easy to follow. You can test your documentation by finding a subject who fits the profile of your documentation user persona, and then ask them to complete tasks which require them to refer to the documentation. How well they perform in these tasks will give you an indication of how good the documentation is. You may need to go back and make further changes, but don't be discouraged. Remember, this is an iterative process. You won't get it right the first time, and it'll take several rounds of revision to get your documentation up to standard. So, you've iterated several times and you're happy with the quality of your documentation. Now it's time for the final step, which is distributing the documentation and communicating the changes to your stakeholders. Once you've made the necessary changes, it's time to distribute the updated documentation. Make sure that everyone who needs access to the documents has a copy. This may involve printing out hard copies or making the documents available online. It is important to communicate the changes to your stakeholders, be they internal users like your employees and colleagues, or external stakeholders such as your customers and other users. Hold a meeting or training session or webinar to review the updates and answer any questions. This can help ensure everyone knows the changes and how they will impact their work. So, in conclusion, using outdated documentation can have several severe disadvantages for an organization, from compliance issues to losing customers, and updating documentation is important to ensure that your organization is operating efficiently, complying with regulations, and communicating effectively. By regularly reviewing and updating your documentation, you can ensure that it remains accurate, relevant, and useful. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you'd like to know more about technical writing or need help with your company's technical documentation, visit our website documentwrite.dev. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.